Good evening. I'm Randy Kiko on the Transition Committee from Bloomington, Indiana. And it's my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Baskerville Burrows from Chicago, and I'll let her introduce her husband.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to be with you. I want to introduce my husband, Harrison Burrows. And we are both... We're so grateful to have this opportunity to get to know you all a little bit. So I'll let Randy get going with the first question.
We'll start off on the first question. The Diocese of Indianapolis is comprised of many small parishes, most of them outside the metropolitan Indianapolis. How have you built community across geographic, economic, and social differences, and how will this experience help you build community in this diocese?
So my title in the Diocese of Chicago is Director of Networking. I don't think there's another title like that in the church, right? Creative. We don't have a canon to the ordinary. They took that position and split it out 3 ways. And so 1/3 of that position is about being a canon for connection. I'll tell you what it's about. It's about bringing people together, connecting folks so that they're able to work together more effectively because they're joining together in ministry. It's about communicating our story of who we are, why we do what we do, what is the faith that compels us to go out into the world to make a difference. And we use social media and print media and all kinds of new technologies to do that. We have to know who we are. And then the third part's about connecting people to their passions so that they could, out of their connection to their passion, be generous to the support of transformative ministry. So it's raising resources to do that work. About 5 years ago, the Diocese of Chicago said, we're inward looking. The bishop's staff doesn't get out much. We need to turn the tables. And so they made an effort to say, there is no reason for a bishop's staff than to be present with the congregations around the diocese. And we have about 120-something of them scattered around, northern Illinois up to the lake, down to the Mississippi River, southwest Illinois. So they're all over the place, large, small, urban, rural, suburban, struggling, successful, all of that. It's a mix. It's diverse, like here. And so my position's about telling our stories, connecting people, building relationships across distance, and taking all of these diverse gifts and saying, this is who we are, and broadcasting that to the world, and broadcasting it to ourselves so that we have a common identity. And it's in being abundantly present. Because after all of that, it means nothing if we're not actually showing up for one another in person. And so what that looks like is going out and discovering the incredible ministries happening in small places, like at St. Chad's. St. Chad's is a small church of about 12 people, 3 hours from Chicago. And you can be connected to a diocese and be a mile from the bishop's office, or you can be disconnected a mile from the bishop's office. It's a state of being. And so here they are 3 hours away. And we were doing some ministry together, and they said, we want to figure out how to feed people. And we like to fish. So they created a catfish ministry. And it's the best thing. They said, you would like to fish, we're going to grow some catfish in these kits, and we're going to feed our community, because that's what we know how to do. And people may look at us and say we're small and struggling and we're out on the outskirts, but we're making a difference. And the rest of the diocese said, oh my gosh, wow, we can learn from that. And so there's this interplay and exchange of ideas and creativity. They also then said, the old adage, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man a fish, you feed him for the rest of his life. Well, they started giving catfish kits to people so that now people across Loves Park and outside of Rockford are growing their own fish to feed themselves so they can afford to eat well. Love those stories. Telling those stories are important, but I have to say the place of greatest impact, and has been about with Quincy. You remember the Diocese of Quincy and the whole split? We had 9 congregations, faithful congregations who said, we want to stay in the Episcopal Church. We're about inclusion. We're about a table of welcome for all people. And so their property was gone, their assets were gone, and because we could do a quick technical fix with reunifying, we said, come on back home. and we reunified. And we have been like a super highway back and forth to these 9 congregations, some of them just a dozen people, some of them a little bit larger, saying that our job is to show up for one another and to build relationships. And we did the usual things, potlucks and picnics. We used technology, social media, and all kinds of web conferencing to allow folks to participate in leadership from a distance. But over and over again, the most important thing is saying we are rebuilding trust and relationship by being present to one another. So you have to know, if you were to call me to be your bishop, that is a high value for me. Showing up abundantly, being richly present, one-on-one and in groups, to make a difference by building real relationship where we can know each other and do the good work of the gospel.
Next question. How would you use your amplified voice in the church to serve our call to promote justice and dignity in every human being in the church, in the local community, and in the greater world?
I love the word amplify. You know, that sort of lifting up and turning up higher and bringing a focus on. And that's something I think the Episcopal Church has a particular charism for, a particular gift. It's been said that the Episcopal Church can put people in a room that might not otherwise get together. And so we're able to bring, because we've got this big tent mentality, we can bring people together and to do more together than we might be able to do alone. And so when we think about what it means to amplify as bishop or as diocese, I think about this diocese and what it means to speak out on an issue of justice with 10,000 voices behind you. That's a strong message when it's delivered with that many voices. And the church has a particular role, I think, to proclaim God's love and the worth and dignity of every human being and to spread that message as loudly and as clearly as we can. But amplification can take lots of forms, and it's a matter of listening to see how we turn up the dial, right? So gun violence is a big issue in the Diocese of Chicago. It's a big issue in lots of places. Our kids right now probably, guns are doing enormous damage, wrecking lives. And listening to a conversation held by 2 priests who said, the church has not done much on this. We've not shown up. We need to come together and actually confess that we have not been present and lament the pain and the carnage, really, and to say that God wants something else for us. So we organized and we said, okay, we can use the amplified voice of the church to link arms with Episcopalians and people of other faiths and denominations and those of no faith who care about decreasing gun violence. And we put 1,400 people on the street in 2012 with our first crosswalk procession, walking 4 miles through the city of Chicago saying that we don't want this to happen anymore to our children. We did that again in 2013, 1,000 people linking arms on the street, telling the story about how we are going to show up and not abandon those who are living in neighborhoods of great risk. But at that point we said, we can process, but what are we doing besides making that witness of presence? We need to be present in a different way. So we listened and we said, nothing stops a bullet like a job. So we created the Crosswalk to Work program to allow young people in at-risk communities to have a mentored summer job, where we say, we Episcopalians are all over the place. We can offer a job. We can come alongside a young person and to say, there are some skills you can learn by working at this seminary library or this law firm or this executive search firm, and we're going to walk with you and give you a future that you can believe in. That's part of our amplified voice, saying that we've got some resources and gifts to give, and we can work actually kind of quietly, one-on-one, to transform lives. So I want to tell you about Michael, one of our first Crosswalk to Work students, who was 16 when I met him, and he lived 2 miles away from downtown Chicago, on the west side of Chicago. And he said it wasn't until he did the internship that he actually went downtown, because that wasn't supposed to be his world. And so here we are, linking arms, using our voice to tell a different story that changes lives. So he did his internship, and then at the end of the summer, we brought everybody together to actually celebrate the work we had done. And we said, let's bring the students and the mentors who gave of their time said, this changed me because I actually got to put my faith into action. I got to do something with making a difference in real time with a real person. But Michael came on that hot September day in a wool coat. It was this beautiful Timberland wool coat, and he said, I grew up in Chicago, and I've never had a real winter coat until now, and I bought it with my money from this internship, and I had to bring it to show it to you. I mean, it was just, this is what it's about. So if you were to call me, you should know that listening deeply, again, is a core value of mine, and I would want to know, what is it that you are concerned about that you want to amplify to the world? How do we raise a voice together to make a difference in our communities using all of the resources at our disposal? And I don't just mean money, I mean time and passion and commitment. And then linking together, we can make a real powerful witness.
The next question is one that Jennifer chose, and it is, Michael Curry is proclaiming the Episcopal Church as the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement. What does that mean for you, and how do you see the Jesus movement impacting the Diocese of Indianapolis?
So you gotta love that, right? The Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement. I mean, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. And it's true. We are the Episcopal way of following the ways of Jesus. And I love it because we say the name Jesus, frankly. I gotta put that out there. I love the fact that we are proclaiming Jesus, because that's what we're about, and we shouldn't be ashamed of it. It's something that we can proclaim proudly. And so when I hear the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement, it's not a program, it's not a plan, it's not a club, it's an actual movement of us putting our feet on the ground and trying to make a difference in the world and bringing a message of love into a world that hears so much rhetoric of hate and fear and suspicion. And to say, you know what, actually God has a different language, and we want to proclaim that. And it's essential that we do that. And I want to tell you a little bit about my story. And if you could think about, what is it that keeps you in this church that you would want to follow the Episcopal way of following Jesus, When I was a kid, I didn't grow up in the church, like any church. We were culturally Christian, if you will. There was a picture of Jesus in the kitchen that I remember, and we learned to say the "Now I lay me down to sleep" prayer, and that was it. And I wanted to go to church, but my parents were not church-going people. I had cousins who were getting baptized and friends who went to church, and sometimes I'd go with them, but I couldn't get myself there. We were in Brooklyn, like an 8-year-old walking the streets of Brooklyn, even in the 70s would be a problem. So I had to wait until I could do something about it later. So when I was in high school, I was on a leadership week in Washington, D.C., and the weekend came, and they said, you can choose a church to go to. And I chose the Episcopal Church because I liked the word, Episcopal. So my 8th grade English teacher, Mrs. Horowitz, a Jewish woman of great faith, had us read a play called Life with Father about a 19th century New York Episcopal family, and I fell in love with the words Episcopal and confirmation and catechism, and it's a very funny play. If you can Google it and look it up on Netflix. But 4 years later, given the choice, I chose Episcopal and found myself at St. John Lafayette Square in D.C. and had a conversion experience because I had never heard music so beautiful or a sermon that spoke to me so deeply or pageantry and liturgy. I didn't have the liturgy word at the time, but you know what I mean. Just like it was beautiful, and I heard God say, "You are home. You are home. You belong." And I was this really nerdy, bookish kid from the projects, and I heard God say, "You are home." So 6 months later, I got to college. There was an Episcopal church on campus, and there I was. Our message is powerful. And to be able to be a place that's about God's love is powerful. So when I read your profile, and I saw that you described yourself as wanting to be beacons of Jesus Christ for Central and Southern Indiana, I thought, oh, I can get down with that. I can get down with that because you were actually talking about wanting to shine the light of Jesus into the world, which is a beautiful thing. A beacon, as you know, draws people, it guides them home. And so thinking about this diocese as one called to shine the light of Christ into the world, to bring people home to God, to belonging, home to their belovedness. That's what the Jesus movement is about. Michael Curry also likes to say, as he talks about the Episcopal Church, he says, and you can almost hear him, he says, God's not finished with us yet. God's not finished with us yet, right? You know, he says that a lot. And I would agree with that. God's not finished with us, but I actually also think that God is just getting warmed up. And I look forward to exploring what that might be like together.